So our guest speaker tonight is Steve Taylor, with the company he founded. He's the president of Wahoo Studios in Orem. Steve and his team have long been a fixture of the Utah game development scene and have created and shipped multiple original IPs, as well as licensed and contracted products on consoles and PC. You know, Wahoo lists the great and the good among their clients, including EA, Disney, and Microsoft. One of the nicest, most talented people in Utah game development scene. It's my pleasure to welcome tonight to Uden, Steve Taylor. Steve?
Hi. I have a Uden tattoo, but now that the website is Uden, I feel like I need to have a T added to my tattoo. So hi, I am the founder and current president of Wahoo Studios. I'm going to describe why these two images matter. The one on the left there is the logo for Wahoo Studios, which is really our company, and the one on the right is a brand, and I'm going to explain how all that works. I'm going to present a little bit of history, a little bit of background, explain what we do, and talk about a couple of problems that we face as a studio and things that we don't think are problems. So we'll see. So this was us a year ago. So to be blunt, we had a tough year, and we did some layoffs, and these are not all of my current employees. In fact, one of those guys is working for Wildworks and helped them win their frickin' software. So yeah. So this was us, and I'm really proud of the team that we built, but we still have a core team doing the work that we do. So what is Wahoo Studios? We are an independent game development studio. We have been around for 14 years, and we do everything. We build games from scratch from nothing to completely done and shipped, and we do everything in between. We started out doing things like writing contracts for less, in fact. We did nothing but go write this dialogue, and we went and did it, and we did art and level building, and we've done programming and ports and everything. So in terms of contract work, we can do whatever, and we have for 14 years, and it's been great. So we also found that as we were working with publishers, they earned the right by paying us to be able to tell us exactly what to do. And when the publisher says, make that pixel green, then dang, we make it green, even if we don't like it. So we found that when we worked on our own internal creative ideas, we wanted to have a separate brand in order to do our own thing. And first of all, we could always do things not subject to the direction of a publisher, but we wanted to be able to build our own name and build our own brand, so that's why we created NinjaBee to be separate from that. So NinjaBee is the other half of our studio, and we really do, it's all the same people, it's all the same company, it's just a brand, and really it's about half the work that we do. Half the work is contract work, half the work is completely internal, creative, self-funded work. So we do our own creative direction, we build and develop and retain ownership of our own IP. We work on projects that publishers maybe wouldn't touch because it's a little bit riskier, but we also have the potential for more reward, and we come out the end of that owning our work, which is great. As Wahoo Studios, this is a small piece of, in 14 years we've done tons of titles, so this is a small piece of some of the things that we've done, just to give you a kind of a glimpse there, and then this is a small glimpse of the things that we've done as NinjaBee. Let me talk a little bit about IP development, because that's one of the funner things that we do. We create characters and worlds and stories and build them, and we own them when they're NinjaBee. We do this for contract work as well, but when it's NinjaBee, then we retain ownership. Here's an example. We built a game called A Kingdom for Keflings in collaboration with Microsoft. Well, sort of. We built that game, we funded it, Microsoft was where we released the game, and we tied into their avatar system, and that was a big deal to us. But this is our title, and we own it. And we developed downloadable content for it. We developed a sequel, which is what this is World of Keflings is the sequel to A Kingdom for Keflings, and we're working on a third version of the game right now. So that's an example of, we built something that we care about and that we love, and we're still working on it. So here's another example of IP that we put a lot of time and effort and attention into. This one we did actually with Sony, or at least, yeah, we did this with Sony, and we may or may not do future games based on the same IP in the future. So that's a fun part of our jobs. Here's an example of, we took our IP and collaborated with Microsoft to do avatar items on their avatar system, and that was pretty interesting. So my background is I've been in video games for 19 years. Before that I was doing other software development in Utah, but I've been in video games for 19 years, working for Les's company, Sapphire, and initially, and I was there for 6 years and left and started my own company. And since that time I've been running Wahoo Studios. So that's my background. All of that is in Utah. And so I have lots and lots of Utah background. I was in Spain for a while, so I've been around the world and I keep coming back to Utah. I like it here, my family's here. I definitely would like to be part of building more game development power in Utah. I made this chart a couple of years ago to illustrate what I had learned over a long period of time about the history of game development in Utah. And you don't need to be able to read this, you probably can't read it. It's here just as an illustrative example of how long and big our history is. People outside of Utah have no idea how much game development happens in Utah and how much has happened. Sculptured and Evans and Sutherland were here, what, 20-something years ago, and they were a big deal, and they spawned studios, and those studios spawned studios, and it's been huge. I was asked to talk about the changes that I've seen within Utah, and this is the introduction to a concept, which is what has changed. Well, it used to matter that all of these, or all of the people at the top of this chart, were professional, traditional game dev studios. And what matters now, and what has changed, is that most of those guys are gone. Some of them are still here. But what we see now is something more like this. 1 million smaller studios doing relevant, serious work. This is a really butchered screenshot, sorry, from the Utah Games Guild website. That list on the left scrolls and scrolls. There's tons of studios in that list. There's professional studios that aren't on that list. The actual amount and individual number of groups of people making games in Utah has exploded, and that's been a big change that I've seen. And it's become, instead of you have to be either Disney or go somewhere else, now it's, hey, you can be 15 people, you can be one person, you can make games, you can make money, you can be a professional even if you're doing it on your own. So that's been a huge change from my point of view. So I'm going to first focus on Utah Valley. I think right now we're the only studio in Utah Valley. I think didn't used to be the case. People come and go, but most of the game dev companies are in Salt Lake City. So what's been our experience working in Utah Valley, which I think is unique to us? There are people who live in Utah Valley who want to make games, and so they will find us and prefer us and hear about us in the first place, which is a big advantage to us when we're looking for people who want to be making games. But then, of course, we also work very hard on our company culture and try to make it a great place to work. So when people do come there, then they stay, and we do get people commuting down from Salt Lake because we are a great place to work in addition to being in a good location that we prefer. We being the owners and the company, I have people who've worked with me for 9-10 years at this point, and they're really part of the culture that we've built, and they prefer to be in Utah Valley, so our plan is to stay in Utah Valley. We do have proximity to a few important entities within the industry, including BYU and UVU, and that sometimes works to our advantage. There are some downsides. When clients come to visit us, which happens from time to time, and they have to drive down to Orem from the airport. It's 45 minutes, but that doesn't matter as much as I think. We've never heard anyone complain ever about that, and really they're used to it. If I were to go to see Microsoft, I would fly into Seattle and I'd drive 40 minutes to get to Redmond anyway, so everybody's pretty much used to that. It's not a big deal. It is out of the way for some Salt Lake City industry events. I had to drive up to Salt Lake to lose the softball tournament. And this event I had to drive up here, but it's like maybe once a month. The thing is, most of the time it doesn't matter. Orem's great. We get our work done, we communicate with our clients online, we do the great job that we do, and it kind of, in some ways, doesn't matter where we are. We could be in St. George. So most of the time, 85–90% of the time, it's not really relevant where we are. We're just happy to be in the States. So let's look at a bigger view. What are the benefits from our point of view to being in Utah? And really, some key things are, there's a huge game dev community here that nobody knows about. anybody who is just starting to work with Utah Studio says, yeah, you know, I was surprised to hear that there's an EA studio here. And we're like, yeah, I don't think you know that there are a dozen big studios and 50 tiny studios in Utah. So that stuff matters to us, not just emotionally, but also in practical ways. We occasionally collaborate with other studios around here. We've done work with EA and Disney and other people on projects. We sometimes hire people. If somebody's leaving a group, then we're an option for them to come work for us. If we let people go, then they have places to go, which is great for them, and we certainly care about that. We are part of community gatherings like this event here today, and that matters to us. There are also organizations that are relevant, like the IGDA, which is, yay, Josh, and which is important, and IGDA does things like the Final Burn events at the end of the game development year, basically. And there's the Utah Games Guild, which is putting together databases and connecting people and doing awesome stuff. That's another Josh. The Utah Indie Games Group is really important to me. I've been part of that group for a long time. Greg runs that group, but there's 50 people at every event. They get together, they show their games. Man, I love that stuff. And it's a real advantage from my point of view of being a game developer in Utah. So we also really like the strong schools here. We hire people straight out of U of U, out of BYU, out of USU. These schools are great. They have great programs. The EAE program at the U of U is very highly rated, nationally rated, very, very high quality program for game development. And that is super relevant to us. There's also non-game technology strength in Utah that we tap into as much as we can. It's occasionally difficult to get somebody working at an existing family software development company to quit and come work in games because they're used to a certain way of doing things and a certain set of expectations. But we occasionally succeed, we occasionally bring people into games, and that's great for us because there's a ton of experience here. We also go to events. There's a JavaScript meetup in Salt Lake, there's a JavaScript meetup in Orem. I love those things, even though those people are probably never going to work for me. They are intelligent, capable people with a lot of cool ideas, and we love connecting with that. And that's really strong in Utah, in my experience. So, this is actually the end of my presentation. I was asked to talk about what are the challenges we face and what do we need as a studio. So in order to do that, I have to split things up again into what we need as Wahoo and what we need for NinjaBee. Remember, Wahoo is contract development, and NinjaBee is internal self-published, as much as possible, creative works. So let's talk about what we need. And really, this slide is too complicated. It boils down to, as a contract studio, we need contracts, and we need people to execute the contracts. And it's as simple as that in concept, but in practice, it's difficult to find the work, and it's difficult to really get somebody to sign on the dotted line. And that's a challenge that we face for sure. And we also currently face, it's hard, I spend years and years building a collection of fantastic people, and when we run into trouble and we lose a couple, then it's hard to rebuild that, and that's a problem that we face as well. But again, being part of the Utah community is often an advantage in that area as well. The thing that is maybe more emotionally interesting to me is, what does NinjaBee need? And it really boils down to one concept, which is discoverability. And I want to choose that one word to say, that's it, it's discoverability. But what does that mean? I need people to find my games, to hear about them, to see them, to download them, in some way care about the fact that my games exist. If you're an independent developer, you know that this is the first problem, and the second problem, and the third problem. It's all of the problems that you face as an independent developer, is getting somebody to care about your games, to know about them, and to try them out. There is nothing more critical for us. As an indie studio, if people can't find your games, you're dead. There are 500 to 700, depending on who you ask, games released per day on iOS. 500 games per day. There's just an incredible challenge standing out among that group if you're an iOS developer. And the same challenge exists on other mobile platforms, on Steam, on PC, and more on consoles. We have made a good, we've built a good history releasing games as an independent on consoles, but that world is also getting, let's say, less lucrative and more challenging as well. So it's crucial, and it's the problem that we've got to solve. And what I don't want to do is say, okay, now I've met Jeff, because that's one guy who's going to buy my game, and now I've met Ross, and that's one guy who's going to buy my game. But what I need is to reach the world. So I'm really excited about connecting with other Utah people. What I really, really need is a way for my development and any efforts that we as developers are doing in Utah to have global reach and global impact and have somebody care about what I'm doing. And I'm not going to be prescriptive about how to solve that problem. I just need to solve it. So, so it's interesting. If you want to come yell at me and tell me the answer's obvious and here's how you solve it, then great. I'd love to listen to you. Yeah, so that's the key thing there. I also believe that if there is something that Utah can do to say this is a partial or great solution to the discoverability problem, then I think developers will move here, and that is good. So, for example, I go to GDC and Maryland has a booth there. Maryland isn't saying, let's connect Maryland developers. Maryland is saying, let's promote Maryland to the world. And I go to GDC and I hear about it, and I see their games, and I care. And I think, as a developer, I think, wow, Maryland's on the map for me now, whereas before they totally weren't. So if we can try to address this problem for Utah developers in general, I think we can be on the map for a lot of people where we weren't on the map before. So that's it. Here's my contact information if you want to get in touch. And John, where did John go?
Yeah.
Do you want me to get the heck off the stage now?
Q&A.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to make sure. I maybe had more cat slides or something. I don't know.
Later.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm just going to bring up a browser. We're going to search for cat images. No. So that's my presentation. I would love to take questions and answer questions about anything that we talked about or the problems that I talked about at the end. I've been doing this for a pretty long time in Utah the whole time. There are people in here with more Utah background than me, like Jeff, but I think I can answer a lot of questions about game development. So let's go. Yes?
If you were going to start over today, what would you do different than what you did when you started?
If I was going to start over today, what would I do different than when I started? One thing that took us a minute to learn, and by a minute I mean a couple of years, is there's nothing stopping us from just building our own stuff. We thought we had to follow everybody else's rules and do what they said and get contracts and get publishers to hire us, and at some point that wasn't necessary anymore. So the first thing was, hey, if we've got time, let's go build our own games. And the second thing was so that's the first thing. The second thing is build one game instead of trying. We were building prototypes and demos and concept pitch after concept pitch, trying to get somebody to bite on something. And that was okay, and I think we still need to do that to some extent. But dang, when we finally buckled down and built a game called Outpost Koloki, doors opened. And it wasn't just indie doors, it wasn't just self-publishing doors, it was contract jobs as well. So just build stuff, just go do stuff. And I had learned that already as a developer. The way you get hired at a game studio, a lot of people ask me, sorry, now I'm ranting. The way a lot of people ask me, how do I get into the games industry? I'll tell you the answer. Here's how you get into the games industry. Do something. Go do it. If you want to be a programmer, write code. If you want to be an artist, make art. If you want to be a musician, make music. Build it. Build a portfolio, show it to somebody, and they'll hire you. That's the answer. And it turns out that's kind of the answer for developers as well. You can't tell somebody you can do something. You have to show them that you're going to do it. And if we had known that day one, I think we would have spent way less time building prototypes and pitches and way more time building products. So that's the answer.
And did you raise capital when you first started?
No, we bootstrapped to the most incredible extent you can imagine. We had left Sapphire. To be blunt, Sapphire was in very difficult times. They were going from, I don't know, 150 people to 15 people really fast. So some of us weren't getting paid, and I figured, hey, I can not pay myself just as well as somebody else can not pay me. So there's an interesting story, but basically a friend of mine was leaving, and I said, let's go, I'm with you. So we we bailed, and Hal knew I had wanted to make a studio for a long time, so Hal was very supportive. But we left, and we had nothing. We had no contracts, we had no jobs, and we didn't really have any money. So we got a basement apartment behind the Purple Turtle in Pleasant Grove, and not apartment, office actually in the basement, and the rent was $300 a month, but we talked the landlord into $100 a month, and then ramping up from there for 1,000 square feet. So like ridiculous, no money basically. And we found out that the place flooded every spring. We found that out in the spring. But that was fine. And we just started pounding the pavement. And I called Les and I said, help. And Les said, I got a dialogue writing job you can do for, I don't know, $50 or I can't remember how much it was. And we're like, okay, yes. And that was another thing I learned is say yes to everything. So we said yes to everything for years and just started doing jobs. And slowly bootstrapped up from nothing. We traded back pay for desks and didn't pay ourselves and started to get a couple of contracts here and there and built up from there. So we did not have funding. And so today, the owners of the company are me and Lane and Brent, and we've all been owners for pretty much the whole time. A couple months after founding. I should be clear and say, I founded the company with Keir Knowlton, who is an awesome guy, and things just changed over time. So, go ahead.
So, between you and the founders, what was the total starting member size of the company, and how did you work out the legal arrangements of how that company was going to operate and how pay was going to work and those kind of things?
So the question was, what was the starting size, and how did we work out the legal details? There were two of us that originally, just me and Keir, and we put some desks up in an office and started writing documents and started calling people, started emailing people. And it was very cowboy. People had told us, it's going to be hard. And we said, yeah. And they said, no, it's going to be harder than you think. And we said, yeah. Well, it was 10 times harder than that. And we had no idea what we were doing. So initially, we didn't really solve any of those problems. And we just had to kind of figure them out one at a time. When suddenly we had employees waiting for work, or not employees, we had contractors. We had come out of a situation where people weren't getting paychecks, and so we swore we would never do that, and we have never done that. In 14 years, I have never missed a payroll, ever. I have unfortunately had to do layoffs, but I've never owed anybody money. So we hire contractors. And when we ran into problems like, well, I don't have work for that guy, then I'm going to tell him in advance, and we had to figure that out on the fly. We had the advantage that Keir was more of a design type, and I was more of a tech type, so that was pretty obvious. And we immediately realized we needed a business guy. We immediately discovered that I hate that side of things, and so we brought Lane in. We said, we need somebody like Lane, so let's keep looking. Yeah, boy, if only we could find somebody like Lane. And then eventually we just asked Lane, and he said, sure. So Lane joined us and did the business side. And then a few months later, Brent, who had actually left Sapphire, so that explosion on my chart way back there, I don't know how to back up, technology, in the middle of it is Sapphire going pow into like 8 studios. And one of them was a studio that Brent started. And things didn't work out the way that they had hoped. So he was doing contract work with us. Again, one of the cool things about Utah, there's so many people and we all know each other. There's really nothing stopping me from working with you on that, with that guy, and it's great. So we were working with Brent on something, and then he said, hey, why don't you join us? So he joined us as a third partner, and he had an art background, and then we really business, art, tech, and Brent and I do design. Then it was great. So did I answer your question, or did you want more about the legalities of it?
Cowboy is an acceptable answer.
The
reason I asked this thing is that when you have like a group of people who are kind of close and you get together, then you start talking about the ramifications of how things get paid, and if one person's got an idea or they work harder than the other person, it sounds like things kind of just happen naturally for you. But
yeah, and we've had arguments, but we also we're very careful to work with people who we like working with, and I am careful to work with people I like working with. So we argue and we figure it out. Kira and I had more of a let's fight it out approach, and Lane and Brent and I fight some as well, and we just figured out. Today it's been 14 years, so we've got it figured out mostly, but in the first few years it was tough. And fortunately, before Kira and I started, we did agree to some principles, like we will never miss a payroll. We will let people know way ahead of time, and we have always. Even when we did recent layoffs, we let people know that we were in trouble. And I was astounded, and still to this day am grateful to my employees for sticking around according to their ability to stick around. If I say, you know what, guys, we knew a year ago that we were going to run into some problems because we do cash flow projections, and we know that the work is drying up a little bit. And so we explained to people, in a few months, if we don't get more work, then we might run into trouble, and we'll let you know. And we did. And we respected them enough to tell them that, and they, in turn, stuck around and gave us a lot of faith. So that was part of that principle that Kira and I started with on day one, was let people know what's going on. So we did agree on fundamental stuff, and that helped a lot. And then occasionally we argued. So I think there was, yeah, Ross.
Hi, Steve. Yeah.
Hi, Ross.
It's been a long time. It's been about 10 plus.
Yeah, I should come give you a hug.
It's been a while, so I'm kind of curious as to catch up with history a little bit. But I'm curious as to about 10 plus years ago when we picked up the phone and called. We talked a little bit and things got in motion. And I'm kind of curious, if you look back over those 10 years, what you sort of knew as the critical path moments for the company, both good and bad, I guess, and where are you so that you're standing here today?
Yeah, sure. So the question is, in our history, what were the critical moments, good and bad? And I think I could pretty safely say that connecting with the LiveArcade group at Microsoft, and for people who don't know, this is Ross. He was one of the people who created LiveArcade a long time ago and was absolutely crucial in making it happen. So, weird story. I knew Ross already because he was at the Microsoft studio that was in Salt Lake. And so we had met. And so we were building what we thought was a prototype to sell to a publisher. And in our list of publishers to talk to, one of them was Microsoft. And so we were talking to Ross at Microsoft, and he said, yeah, that's cool, I can connect you with people, and maybe we'll publish this, but you know what you need to do is you need to look at LiveArcade. That moment, right there, Ross saying, you need to look at LiveArcade, I don't think there's a bigger point in our history, inflection point, because we didn't know what it was, they showed it to us, we were very console focused, we love consoles. So here was an opportunity for us as a small independent studio to build our own game on our own rules and release it on our own. It took us about 30 seconds after hearing the pitch to say, yes, we want to be on LiveArcade. And a huge future resulted from that. So that was a pretty big deal. And then we had some big contracts that were maybe not $10 million contracts, but they were big to us and they made a difference. We did a contract with EA that helped us grow from, well, we were like 30 at the time, and we grew to 45 or so. And that was a great contract and really beneficial for us. So that was a pretty big deal. And we had a contract go south in a bad way, like a just really bad blood publishing deal. And that was a negative experience that didn't kill us financially, didn't really hurt us too bad, but really affected my view of working with publishers and who we work with and how badly things can go potentially. So I'd say those are some pretty key points.
If you look over the last, say, 2 to 4 years, certainly the mobile revolution and so forth, is there anything significant in those past 4 years, again, either good or bad, that has been a real milestone moment for the company?
It's hard to say. So the question is the same, but the last just couple of years. It's hard to say that there was a moment on mobile, but mobile has changed our lives. We don't know how to make money on mobile. So yeah, I think a lot of people don't. And admitting that to ourselves was never a moment, but was an experience, was something we had to learn. We don't know how to make money on mobile. We are not making a mobile game right now because we don't know how to make money doing that. And that has been a huge shift for us. And with so much of the industry focusing on that, some of our contract work went away, but that's been a big shift, really difficult to deal with. Indie development getting huge. There's 10 billion indie companies all over the universe, and competing on those terms is really difficult. So that's been a huge shift. Not a moment, but the last couple of years. So when I look at that slide I showed of all of my family and losing my family, it had a lot to do with the industry in the last couple of years changing in slow way, or in over a year ways, not individual moment ways. We do a lot of work with Microsoft, and we love working with Microsoft. And there was a moment when a particular channel of work that we do with them, contract work, dried up for a while, and that was pretty painful. That was a bad moment for us, and kind of felt out of our control. So, and I think, I was talking to Jeff about doing this presentation, and anytime Jeff says, "What have you learned?" I have the disadvantage of having to say, "I think I've learned how much I don't know." In 18 years ago, let's say 17 years ago, I had been working at Sapphire for a couple of years, and I got to go to GDC. GDC was a miracle. It was nirvana. It was thousands of developers talking about making games. I just couldn't believe it. I got to go listen to Miyamoto talk about Mario, and it was incredible. And the next year it was pretty awesome. And the next year it was pretty awesome. And by about the 5th year, so I was actually doing presentations. My 2nd, 3rd, 4th year, I was standing up in front of people saying, "Here's how you make games." And I started to realize that everybody was saying the same thing every year, and that things were more complicated than I thought. And what I have spent the last 20 years learning is how much I don't know, and how many problems are out there that I don't have solved. So whenever somebody says, "What have you learned?" the answer, unfortunately, is partly how much I have still to learn and how many problems I still have to solve. So some things I have figured out, and I'm happy to share those with anybody, and I'm really happy to be part of the community. Very happy to contribute to the community in any way I can, and I would still very much like to learn from all of you guys what problems you have solved and how you're making games in your time. So, John standing up, that was an awesome ending, right? That was pretty good for Alpha. Okay, thanks very much. Come talk to me later.
This was my original intro for you, Steve.
All right.
And there is Steve, right in the middle. So thank you, Steve. That was fantastic, and I really enjoyed that. And discoverability being the key takeaway there. So discoverability, yes. And so if we can figure that out, are we really going to share that? Of course. I mean, of course we are. It's obviously.